that then talks to LTV, which is your lifetime value. So you've got these two
Yeah.
metrics that you need to be watching your eyes on. How much is it costing you to find them, and how long are they lasting on your platform, that they're spending money. So it's not just about landing there, but it's about how long do they last paying you.
Yeah, and that's really one of the biggest challenges I see with founders is that they never get to understanding those numbers. They're tied up building product or whatever. But I think one of the biggest opportunities really is if you can get any kind of idea of those numbers as soon as possible. Right? That's why we always say, like, okay, cool, build something in low code. Use a Google form, like use Airtable, like use Notion. Like Boo Boo's shared about how they built Jobbox in Notion. Because it's not about, cool, you've got a crappy looking product. That's not the point. The point is you get validation, but more importantly for me, you get some of the numbers done, right?
Welcome everybody to episode 30 of How Would You Build It, Renier. We've made it the big 3-0.
Yeah, into the 30s we go.
Yeah, a long way to go still. But welcome back. Good to have you. How are you doing today? You feeling confident, feeling good?
Yeah, awesome. I was glad I could school you a bit in Afrikaans there, talking about potgooi,
Yeah.
the
So this is
Afrikaans word for a podcast.
this is a How Would You Build It potgooi. Yeah, learning something new today.
Potgooi.
And
The
what is
plural's even better, potgooier.
Ja, ons is potgooiers. En sê vir my, what is an app?
A toep.
All right. So for all the founders out there that are trying to build a toop or an app, today we thought we could start by talking about different business models. And Renier, I think it's quite an important conversation because I think we've mentioned it many a time on the podcast that people think about the tech, they think about the product, they think about, oh, I have this idea, I have that idea, and they go straight into a build, right? So we've had the likes of Villani on that talked to us about getting that MVP. We've had Boo Boo spoke to us about getting a POC. So we go straight into solution modes and we test the market, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it just kind of feels like we don't actually look at what the business is of this app that you're going to build. And one of the important questions that you have to ask yourself is, what is the business model? I.e., how is this app going to make money? Now, I know you feel strongly about this, but what's your first thoughts in terms of how founders are approaching the subject in South Africa?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's our education system or, the kind of exposure we get or the fact that we cushion children from the disappointment of business failure. And I think on a previous podcast, I spoke about lemonade stands and Girl Scout cookies, and how in America they really use it as not only fundraisers, but really as a base to teach people some of the hard lessons of entrepreneurship. And I recently I saw there's an NGO in America called Lemonade, and you can go check it out. Actually, some South African companies involved in building their tech, but it's really like a toolkit to help people start a lemonade stand or help someone else start a lemonade stand, but doing so within the context and the framework of learning valuable business lessons like entrepreneurship lessons. And with my own kids, like they've got entrepreneur days at school, and you can just see like parents taking shortcuts because it feels like a lot of admin. Like let's just go buy stuff and you go sell it. But I was really thinking about my eldest daughter. When she starts to get into this, like really letting her sit through the pain of disappointment of not being able to make a sale, and then go, okay, well, what are you going to do now? Okay, learn from this. Like maybe we should do a bit of marketing. Marketing is going to cost money. How do you absorb that cost within that which you put out there to still make a profit? So some of those lessons I think are not being taught in a school setting in South Africa. And it's certainly people that come from entrepreneurial families, you can see their parents make a bit of effort to help them learn those lessons, and I think that forms the base of it. So why am I sharing this? So a lot of times when I work with founders, they tend to gravitate towards areas that are more comfortable, which is product development. So they go, cool, I really love building this product and figuring out how to solve this problem. But then 99% of the time is spent on product development and everything that encompasses that, or even everything except the business model. And the business model is often like an afterthought. Like okay, cool, how are we going to make money? So our product's launched. We got 10 users. No one wants to pay. Like, how do we make money, everyone? And the problem with that is the business model needs to be entrenched within the product design. The product design cannot stand separate to the business model. You need to build all of this together.
Exactly.
So, would love to see more South African founders be, build it from the business model side up instead of building it from the product side up.
Mm,
So, and I know a lot of product people would hate me for this, but I also know a lot of product people would love me for saying that when they have clarity as to what the business is supposed to be,
mm.
then building a product that solves that problem actually ends up being easier.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. I mean, I've been in many a project where it's just focused on the product build, and then the conversation on the business model, or how is the business going to be making money out of all of this? What is the return on investment on all of this build? I've had on previous podcasts where we've said, we had the Netflixes of the world that came and showed us what the subscription model was all about. Okay, cool. Now we understand the subscription model, but how does it work for your business? And as soon as you start giving a price tag on it, people's reaction to that product changes immediately, and they don't just want to use it anymore. So it's about how do you add value, what is going to bring people on. But yeah, so I've already spoken about one sort of business model, but I thought we could kind of dive into a few examples. And I know, again, using Netflix as an example, is that we kind of always get schooled by what's happening in the US, but it's not necessarily the same for us here in South Africa and Africa. And doesn't mean that what's happening overseas is what's happening here. But it's still good to understand the models, and we can then try and see if we can incorporate them into our products. So I thought that's what we could do, and then we could also um, look into some of the more popular apps that we have in South Africa and see what business models they're using, so we can actually use live examples of people that can really relate into what we have on our phones and how they're making money out of us. All right. So the first one, Arinia, is the advertising model, which I guess everyone would think of a newspaper or a magazine, or obviously on the TV or radio. And advertising in the software world. Okay, so where does that fit in? It fits in the B2C space, and it's all about eyeballs, right?
Yeah, it is. It is all about eyeballs, and but you need a substantial amount, and I think that's where people often get it wrong, right? They think if you and I think about it, Bobby, 50,000, 100,000 sounds like a lot of people, right? You're not making a lot of ad revenue at 100,000 impressions.
Mm,
You need millions. So it's all about eyeballs, but I think sometimes people underestimate, because if we were to imagine 100,000 people standing on a rugby field, we'd go, "Wow, that's a crap load of people."
mhm,
I mean, just go to a rugby Cape Town Stadium that's full, 60,000 people. If you imagine, wow, all 60,000 people hit your website in 1 month, you go, wow, that's a lot of people. But that's not going to generate any substantial revenue. Now, for anybody listening and not familiar with this, like, I mean, it's all about CPM lately. Like, I mean, how much money do you pay for an ad for 1,000 impressions? Now, impression is a unique person that goes to a website and sees a specific ad. Okay, so 1,000, if the CPM rate, anything from 20 rand up to 1,000 rand for a hyper niche, super targeted audience, and it's very scarce in South Africa. Someone would pay 1,000 rand CPM, which is
mm,
1 rand per impression. So you're looking, the average ads is anything from like 20 rand up, 100 rand maybe if you're doing well. So if you, and I'm not an expert in this space, it's just from what I've observed. So maybe I get some of the numbers wrong, but this is probably a good indication to tell someone, like, if you get 100,000 people on your website and you're selling ads at 20 rand CPM, divide 100,000 by 1,000, you've got what is it, 100 times 20 that you can make from the website. That's 2,000 rand a month.
mm,
Okay, so
mm.
that will probably pay for your servers and your hosting fee and a few other things, maybe buy you
Mm,
a coffee or
mm.
two. So you really need a massive amount of scale for that, or you need to go hyper focused and hyper niche, right? So
Yeah.
let's say I've got a platform that 60% or 50% of all medical doctors use it once a month or once a week, right? They go on there. This could be an email newsletter, it could be a podcast, could be videos they watch, it could be a platform they engage with. Like, I can say, cool, all of them are definitely there. And if you want to speak to medical doctors, this is the place that you have to advertise. Now I can push forward a CPM of 250 to 500, because I can say, look, if you want to speak to doctors, like, there's no better place to find them, highly
Yeah.
engaged here.
Mhm.
And to a degree, that's kind of what we're thinking about in the newsletter, right? So we're building a highly focused niche audience of people that fall in a category of moving first or early with certain kinds of technologies and things that they want to try and do, but also has a certain level of disposable income or decision buying power, at least, that they can spend a bit of money on certain tools and products and
Mm,
services. So if you're building, so either build for massive scale, and I mean massive scale, we're talking about millions, and
mm,
there's an app that most South Africans use that are fall in that category, which we can get to in a moment, or go hyper niche and build a highly engaged audience in a hyper
mm,
niche space.
mm. Yeah.
So yeah, that app that gets that impressions is Eskom Push.
Mm,
I mean, they get millions. So you can just imagine. I think they reported the other day they've got 4 million active users still, not
mm-hmm,
mistaken. I mean, if there's load shedding multiple times per day, like let's say 25% of the people open it every time to check if there's load shedding. If there's 4 slots of load shedding, you see 2-3 screens per engagement.
mm-hmm.
That's two,
Yeah.
three times a million. That's, let's call it
Mm,
3 million just for those users. 4 times a day, it's 12 million.
yeah.
You're probably aiming, upward of 15 million impressions a day.
Yeah.
Now, that's per day. Okay.
Mm.
So take that at a 20 Rand CPM, you can kind of figure out how much money Eskom's Push is making through ads.
Sorry for
Um,
exposing you guys.
so that, yeah, sorry. But I didn't disclose the action. I'm guessing. Um, but what it's such a unique thing. Like, I mean, load shedding.
Mm,
Yeah, it's what else in South Africa gets that amount of traffic? Maybe some of the
mm,
news sites. But even at those models, they couldn't sustain it. So a lot of them had to move over to subscription
mm,
offerings to top up the revenue because the money made from ad revenue is simply not enough.
mm. Oh, look, it's no surprise. I mean, it's no like, yeah, we all know that the whole advertising industry is nothing what it was 10 years ago. I mean, newspapers and all the traditional stuff, even your SABCs, like your Mnets, all of that stuff. It's just everything's changing. We're going on to Netflix and Disney and all these on-demand services where, as soon as we see an advert, we actually want to shy away from it. So it doesn't have a good history. But, speaking of advertising, Alex Lieberman from the Morning Brew, he actually gave out some stats on X this morning of some of the biggest companies in America and their advertising revenues. And obviously, we don't want to compare it to there, but I mean, you're looking at Apple with 5 billion, Microsoft with 12 billion, and Alphabet being Google at $224 billion of ad revenue in a year, which is quite something. 113 billion for Meta. But you can't look at those numbers here. Yeah.
Yeah, and once again, it's kind of fascinating because none of these people are really content generators or content creators in themselves. They just have platforms, right?
Yep.
So you're looking at this going, cool. I want to create a content platform and generate impressions and monetize the impressions. It's actually the platforms that are making the most money. And if you
Mm,
think we're for the least risk and least effort, right? Obviously, there
yeah.
was a massive investment to get to that position, but
Mm,
but the ongoing running and maintenance of that is far less troublesome than having to come up with the apps or the content to keep the users engaged.
mm.
I mean, an example of Eskom Push, if they're using Google AdSense to pull ads from, Google also makes money every time that ad gets displayed, even though they never built that app.
What a great
So,
business model.
so it's that old story. I think we mentioned it last time. It's like when there's a gold rush. Like, what do you build? Do you build
Mm,
pickaxes and shovels, or do you
mm,
or do you build a gold mine? Or I guess the
yeah.
content website or the thing that pulls the impressions, the app is the gold mine. Whereas Google and Apple and Facebook and even Amazon. I mean, Amazon makes a tremendous amount of money on ads on their marketplace.
Yeah. 40 billion for
So
them.
that's been probably the first profitable thing to come out of Amazon e-commerce. Um,
But
you
that's,
know,
yeah, it's a different
they're making,
service.
yeah. So, but once again, that service couldn't have existed had they not have the eyeballs coming to the
Mm,
marketplace.
mm,
So yeah, I think you need massive scale to make it work in South Africa. Do we even have enough eyes? I mean, what else? If you think about Eskom Push, that does reasonably well, and the amount of impressions it gets. Like, I mean, what else has 4 million unique users hitting it multiple times a day?
no, I don't think
Like
there's a
you know,
monopoly
if
like
that's the
that in this
scale that
country.
you need to actually make money in ads, it's like, well,
Mm,
there are very few ideas that actually tick those boxes, at least as
Mm,
far as the general population is concerned. If we go niche, then my
mm.
opinion changes somewhat. But
So
yeah, time will tell.
the
We'll see if the
second
new
one,
filter works.
yeah. So, but Renier, the second one that everyone has probably heard about, which has very similar concepts to what we've just discussed, and I don't know if we have to go into too much detail about it, but it's affiliate marketing, which kind of speaks to it. Like
Mm.
we've got your niche now, you found that complementary app or product that fits into what you're doing, and yeah, now you start marketing off each other. So, do you feel that it has the similar fate as advertising to get affiliate marketing going?
Yeah, so look, why people like affiliate marketing, it's there's a lot less risk for the marketeer, right? So the marketeer says, "Look, I'll pay you for whatever sales you bring me," because then whatever they pay for marketing is just costed into the price of the item, right? So they could easily give away 10% of the item to whoever brought the sale, and then just mark it up by whatever to accommodate that. And whereas if they pay for impressions, there's no guarantee that something's actually going to convert, right? So
Mm,
affiliate marketing obviously is really popular in influencer space. So people punt a product, and 100 people buy, and then you get a fee per item bought, right? Now, I think that could work in the influencer space in South Africa because influencers typically don't have massive overheads. So if they make 500 rand a sale and they make 10 sales, five
mm,
grand, could make a difference. And there are influencers in South Africa that have, a few hundred thousands, even into the millions of followers, right?
mm,
So, and once again, it's about conversion. It's like, well, how many, if a million people see your post about a specific product that pushing forward in the affiliated model, like
mm,
how many of them will actually convert? A very small percentage, so a few
mm,
basis points. Now, a few basis points could mean that if you only have 10,000 followers, it will result in zero sales. Whereas if you have 10 million followers, then it
mhm,
most likely will result in a few that could actually end up being a substantial amount of money.
mm. Yeah.
So once again, you need a big audience for affiliate to work,
Mhm.
and outside of influencers, it could be tricky for startups to hit that space because they typically don't have big
Well, that's what I was
followings.
about to
Now,
say.
so you can actually see like corporates doing affiliate models. I mean, there was
Exactly.
this partner or partnerships, if you will. But I mean, if recently Discovery Health launched a new health plan, I can't recall its name. I think it's 500 rand a month or something. But
Mm,
they launched it via Clicks, so you can go to a Clicks and you can sign up, and then you get a bunch of health benefits
mm, mm,
on that platform. But that is an example of affiliate model because each person, I can imagine each person that signs up via this marketing channel,
mm,
which is Clicks in this example,
mm,
would result in some kind of affiliate fee for Clicks from Discovery,
mm. Yeah.
because they're not spending that money on marketing on above the line, so the marketing cost can flow to affiliate. So definitely corporates are doing it. It definitely works in South Africa. It just needs a certain amount of scale.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It comes down to the scale. Depends on where you are in your journey as a startup or as a business. How far are you along? How many, users do you have on a daily basis that you can then go with it? I mean, we've seen a lot of it, right? Discovery is a great example that you've used. That we've seen that they've got a lot of affiliates, and that is a model. But I don't think it's something that a startup should look
And
into. But maybe something that could subsidize them much later down the line once they've actually got a lot more traction. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So the other one, the next one is e-commerce or a marketplace. I like to kind of talk about it, and I think this one people are a little bit more used to it. We've got our take a lots out there. We have even a sweep south. Is it's a marketplace. Uber. There's your a marketplace of matching supply and demand, and I think that maybe this is where we're seeing the
Yeah.
most success in South Africa.
Well, I think there are a lot of players. If there are a lot of players making money, that's a completely different story. And there's a lot of players generating revenue. Um, but we know Takealot is still not at a profitable space, although their scale is quite significant. I mean, they're building
Mm,
distribution centers everywhere, and they're quite a big team now. So they're pretty much a corporate, like an e-commerce corporate. But what is challenging when you cover so many products that they've got is like some of those products, the margin is
exactly.
extremely small.
Hmm.
And the problem is if you go to a traditional retailer, let's say I go to a Checkers around the corner, their pricing strategy results in a basket margin. Okay, so
Hmm.
they pricing some items they would sell. I wouldn't say at a loss. I don't know. I've never worked in a retailer, but from what I understand, some of the items they would literally make no margin, but they'll make massive margins on other items to come in at a basket price strategy of a certain few percentage points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem is those standalone items that are basically priced at cost price. You need to be able on a take a lot that sells everything to sell some of those items, but now you price competing with someone that has a basket strategy, but baskets in an online environment look completely different. I don't if I go to a Checkers, I would buy a certain amount of things, right? If I go to this place or that place, but now, and I know take a lot's obviously not an FMCG, so there's a bit of a difference here, but some of those items are typically items I can buy elsewhere. So figuring out how to do the pricing strategy in e-commerce is really complicated, because some of those well, at least e-commerce, it covers such a large spectrum, because some of those items cannot have a large margin on, and then you still have that delivery fee you have to absorb, so you need
Exactly.
some kind of margin. So that's really complicated. But there is a space which I think has massive potential, and we actually wrote about it in the newsletter this week. It's about Live Copper. It's a B2B e-commerce site, and actually the Yappy Chef founders invested in it recently. That's why I picked up on the story, and they do e-commerce for fittings for like if you're building or renovating, right? So think
Mm.
about lights,
Yeah.
switches, plugs, those kind of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I really like about this idea is if you think about the process of an interior decorator actually sourcing these different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about sometimes large elements. You're talking about big lights, chandeliers, those kind of things. Driving around and finding the stuff actually costs a high earning interior decorator a lot of time, which gets billed onto the customer, for driving around to all of these different shops trying to find the right stuff. So that's the first thing. There's a
Mm.
high fee in finding something. The second thing is, similar to Amazon when it launched as a bookstore, and the rationale behind it was it's impossible to have one physical bookstore that has a million different titles in, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
can do an online version of that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you don't actually have to have the physical book right there. Now, it's the same thing with Live Copper. They don't have to have a physical item in a display room for someone to walk around and look at it, because such a display room that would house 10,000 products is so big. It's just not practical. You cannot build a display room that big. So you have a large catalog, and you can show a lot of stuff, but you don't have to house it in a physical space. The third thing that I like is they're selling items that can typically have high margins on, right? So when you're selling like a FMCG good, like the margins are really small. But when you sell like a highly unique, lampstand, or light fitting or something like that,
Mm.
chances are you can get away with much bigger margins, right? So and then the final thing is, delays on a construction site when you're waiting for stuff and you can't source the right things. That
Mm-hmm.
ends up costing a lot of money. If you
Mm-hmm.
streamline this entire process, I think there's enormous benefit to the end users, and there's massive margins that can be made from this. So, and when I
Mm-hmm.
saw the Yappy Chef guys getting, I'm like, these guys get e-commerce. I think they're seeing this thing. So niche once again, B2B space, but really, it. I mean, you cannot copy this into a different industry and go, it's going to work. Like, I mean, we can't go, cool, let's build a B2B e-commerce store for catering because the one for construction worked. No, I think this one for construction works for a very specific reason, and
Mm.
those reasons that I mentioned, I think, play a key role into why that one is exciting. I think there are some other ones out there, but it's not an obvious. Oh, let's just build an e-commerce store. You need to figure out, like, okay, well, what is the actual benefit of doing this online versus actual going
Mm-hmm.
to a physical store?
Mm. Well, I think this also, like, listening to you, it's one of the big subjects that we always talk about is like, what does tech do? It helps you scale so that you can get more margin, because, otherwise you're just going to be a
Mm,
small business. And it just kind of sounds, we keep talking about eyeballs, numbers, scale. And I guess that's why we are in this industry. It's about how can we build tech to get you the numbers so that you can build out these numbers that we're referencing, and how can you scale it across borders so you can tap into new markets and just use that same model in more markets, getting more eyeballs. So the more people you can get buying and selling on your marketplace, the more you make. Another business model, and this is where I get a bit like, gives me a bit of a headache, because I totally get it, and being in product and being a product manager and always talking about being product led, is the freemium model. And the problem with freemium models, which I love, it's all about giving the users a taste of the action, a taste of the value. And you talk about, Spotify is a good example where you can access the music by all means, but we're going to throw a couple of ads down you until you pay for your subscription, so you get the value. It's the same as Slack. You can send those messages without having to pay for it, but you're not going to get all the nice features that come along with it. So it's kind of giving the users a little bit, but just knowing that it's going to be quite limited, and you're gonna have to start paying until you actually, before you can get the full value of that of this product that we're giving to you. So I like the concept, but again,
Mm.
I actually literally can't think of a local example of where this has worked, where I'm using something that got me using this model.
Well, actually, Eskom Push has a freemium app which most people use, and there's like a little premium option where it takes away the ads, and
Fair
so,
enough. Fair
so
enough.
they actually do it. But
Okay.
but but it actually comes down to conversion, right? So if you think about your conversion funnel, you hit 100 million people hit your website, right? So 5% of them turn into so now you're faced with two options, right? So you go either we do freemium or we go straight to paid. Okay,
Mhm.
so straight to paid will give you a conversion of 0.5 to 1%. For argument's sake, it differs, but let's say in that range, right?
Mhm.
Freemium could you give you a conversion of between 5 and 10%. Okay, which is really high, but let's use 5%. Okay,
Okay. Mhm.
but then what they figure out as they go along, they go cool from this um, freemium to paid conversion, we can do 25%. Okay. Which means the website to paid conversion is actually now 1.25% as opposed to the zero point 0.5 we would have gotten without that model, right? So that's really the thinking. The thinking is the conversion from one step to the next is going to be higher, which results in a better overall conversion from start to finish. Now, if you only get 1,000 users on your website and you only get 50 on freemium, you might end up with zero paid, right? So so once again, it's about like how many people can you get,
Mhm.
and where does if you were to convert those people into uh, from freemium into paying, what can that convert? What is a
Mhm.
reasonable conversion rate in that space? And I think one of the like I mentioned it, but one of the biggest things is people underestimate how low these rates are and how difficult it is to get that amount of people to come to your website. Just if you're building something uniquely South African.
Mhm.
That being said, there's a lot of South African guys that are building SaaS products, that maybe have a free trial or freemium model of some sorts, but they just straight out focus on an international market because they
Yeah.
understand, like, look, we need millions of eyes on these things to convert all
Mhm.
the way down to the kind of numbers that would make sense for this product. Or maybe if it's a niche, maybe less, but at least target a bigger market so you have a bigger chance
Mhm.
of hitting it. If you
Let's
focus
let's
purely
dive
purely
into
local,
SaaS. Like, let's
big numbers is the game.
before you let's just take it a step back and actually say what is SaaS, right? Because I think that's the most popular one, software as a service, right? And that's where people are paying for it. Can you just go back in and explain? So if you say there's a lot of South Africans that are trying to tap into international markets using SaaS, can
So
you just go back and explain that?
SaaS is typically something like a Slack or an Ocean or a,
Yeah.
um, you know, the email platform we use for our newsletters called Beehive. That's software as a service. And the premise of it really is saying, like, if someone were to build me a custom piece of software to do everything that we're doing in a newsletter. We've got referrals, we've got referral program, we've got recommendations, we've got all the stats and cool stuff and insights as to what people are doing, where they're from, how they're engaging with it. Got these cool poll features. So we've got all of that, right? So if I had to get someone to build me that custom software, it probably would have cost me upwards of R1 million, right? So I'm going, my business isn't as a newsletter isn't viable if I have to pay R1 million to build that, right? But now someone went and said, look, there's a lot of people that have the same problem.
Mm.
Why don't we spend R1 million, maybe a bit more? We built this, but we built it in such a way that multiple people can use it, right? So they go, instead of selling this thing once off for R1 million, let me build this for R1 million, see if I can get, 100 people to pay 2,000 Rand a month. And then if you add all of that over time, there's a substantial amount of upside. Now, obviously, then these businesses typically need VC funding because there's a lot of
Mm.
money that needs to go into product development. But there's also a lot of money that needs to go into growth, right? Because
Mhm.
every new user that you add, every new subscription that you get, there's the differential, the ratio between, cost to service this customer versus income that you get is quite skewed. You get a substantial amount of income compared to the effort to actually service this customer. In fact, the software services the customer, so there's no human involved in servicing. So if you add more users, you literally almost make, pure profit. So that's really the attractive thing about SaaS, and why it's become such a big thing the last 15, 20 odd years,
mm,
is because when you get that right, when you get it to that point where you go past break even from your monthly recurring revenue of these license fees,
mm,
then all of a sudden every single customer that you sign up just ends up, adding more revenue, and the company typically becomes really profitable.
mm, mm.
So really attractive business model, but hard to get going. Why? Because it's capital intensive in the beginning,
Yeah.
substantial amount of risk, and you need a lot of growth funding to actually acquire enough customers to get it across that point where it makes sense.
Mm, mm. Well, that makes me think of a very important metric that is tracked by founders, which is CAC, which is cost of acquisition, right? So how much money are you putting towards finding these people, and how much money are you making out of each person that's coming onto your thing? How long do they last on your thing? That then talks to LTV, which is your lifetime value. So yeah, so you've got these two
Yeah.
metrics that kind of says you can go for a SaaS model, but you need to be watching your eyes on these two metrics. How much is it costing you to find them, and how long are they lasting on your platform that they're spending money? So it's not just about landing there, but it's about how long do they last paying you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, one of the biggest challenges I see with founders is that they never get to understanding those numbers. They're tied up building product or whatever. But I think one of the um, biggest, what can I say, like opportunities really, is if
Mm,
you can get any kind of idea of those numbers as soon as possible, right?
mm,
That's why we always say, like, okay, cool, build something in low code, use a
mm,
Google form, like use Airtable, like use Notion, like Boo Boo's shared about how they built Jobbox in Notion
mm,
some time ago, and using a few other tools and Zapier and connecting all of the stuff together, right? Because it's not about like, okay, cool, you've got a crappy looking product. That's not the point. The point is you get validation, but more importantly for me, you get some of the numbers done, right? So you
mm,
can start to get an idea of, okay, acquire 10 customers, it costs us, if 1,000 rand per customer, right? So now you've got that number down. So our cost per acquisition is 1,000 rand at the moment. Okay. Then you can go, cool, how much are these people paying? Let's say they're paying 200 rand a month. Okay. So you can make 200 rand a month, and you make a bit of a guess. You saw one customer dropping off. You could go, cool, we have natural churn of 10% per year, whatever the case may be, right? Now, at least with those three metrics, you can actually start modeling something. You can go, how big is this market? Like, if we get 10% of the market, which is a lot, but let's say we get 10% of the market, this is what we're going to pay to acquire them at 1,000 rand a customer. And when they're going to be paying us 200 rand a month, and we're going to lose,
mm,
10% of them every 12 months. Okay. Now, any person that's done any kind of Google Sheeting or build a business in Excel, you can model this thing out, right? And that gives you an indication of, okay, if I were to raise money, how much money do I need to do this in 3 months? Okay, now careful. There's a certain rate at which you cannot grow faster. Like, you cannot throw 1 billion rand into marketing for 1 month and buy every single ad in South Africa and think you're going to sign up 40 million people. It doesn't work that way. So that's another trap, but
yeah.
that's an entirely different podcast. Um, but if you're going to be throwing money into this thing, like, how can you grow it with money, right? So should you
Hmm.
go raise money? 200 rand a month coming back, this is your conversion rate from people, money you spend to people coming through the funnel. And you can build kind of an idea of, okay, cool, if I put in 500,000 rand in marketing, like, how am I going to get that money back, right?
How am I going to get that
And
money?
typically, how am I going to get 500,000 back
Mm,
in order to put 500K back into it, right? So
hmm.
you can kind of grow this thing with some of the income that you make back.
Yeah.
So that's really important, right? And then you have decisions, right? So you can go, I'm going to raise funding from a VC, or I am going to bootstrap this thing, right? Because if I keep chucking in maybe a 5 or 10K extra that I make every month, perhaps I can grow this thing at a
Mm,
steady enough pace to make sure no one else comes into the market and cleans us
mm,
out,
hmm.
and get sufficient growth for a viable business.
Yeah.
So And then one can go, maybe I need a VC. I think in South Africa, we've become so used to, watching what happens at YC in America that we go, okay, cool, let's, first step is build an MVP, then get VC. It's like, no, no, no. Build something, understand your metric, use that metrics to build a model, and then figure out, is VC the
Mm.
right vehicle for me to raise funding from, right?
Well, this is
So,
exactly why I wanted to
so I
have this.
think that's where those things really become important.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why I wanted to have this discussion today, because I think we've had so many conversations around these things, but we failed to talk about the dirty side of it, the stuff that the not so pretty side. Like if you're going to put money into it, get it that ROI, because it's an ongoing concern. It's like like the way you just explained it. Like I'm going to put 5,000 rand to make 5,000 rand, but to make the next 5,000 rand, I need to put in another 5,000 rand, and you need to understand that. And it's not just about getting funding so that you can just build the next feature. It's actually about how can you do both? How can you build features that add value while you are growing your revenue? But just to finish for the last business
Exactly.
model, Rene, the last one, which is transaction fees. And I think a lot of what I always think about in terms of this is all the crypto sites, all the crypto exchanges that popped up in the last 6 odd years.
Fintech, baby.
There we go. It was all about transaction fees. So just for the listeners and viewers, that's for every transaction that happens, the platform gets a percentage of that transaction. So I just said crypto, but there's a good example, which is Yoko, which has become one of the only unicorns in Africa, if I'm not mistaken, and their business model is transaction fees. So what's your take?
Mm. Look, it's a massive scale thing, right? And it's highly, highly, highly competitive, right? And I also think, big up for Yoko going into a space where, he's stepping on toes of the four big banks, and because those guys have really deep pockets and they're really well entrenched in a lot of different places, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons they are entrenched and have deep pockets is because of transaction fees, mostly. So,
Exactly.
um, and anybody in banking listening right now is highly offended because I know these banks are really complex in the back and how they make money. But one of the reasons definitely is transaction fees.
Mm-hmm.
So that is definitely a model that is lucrative once it's established, but it's extremely, extremely competitive, and not only competitive locally. I mean, if you look at it internationally, Mastercard, Visa, right? So I mean, the credit card space is dominated, right? And whenever a space pops up that wants to compete with that or take that out, you can bet Mastercard and Visa are standing ready to take that on and cover their ground.
Mm-hmm.
Apple Pay and Google Pay, like moving into that space, doing some stuff over there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
SnapScan was a beautiful business built on transaction fees, right?
Exactly.
And I mean, I hate to admit it, I was a massive fan of SnapScan, but I haven't used it in 2 years. I
Oh,
mean, since
really?
I started using Apple Pay. So, so now all of a sudden you look at something that was quite unique and fresh and pioneering and awesome South African startup, but like overnight, like the big players such as Apple and Google just went cool.
Yeah,
NFC is the way to
exactly.
go. Let's go tap and pay.
Yeah.
And one next step, Yoko built these machines. What happens if Apple and Google just switches on a pause on any machine, and you can tap with your phone on my phone, and I get
Yeah.
paid like that.
Mm.
It's 15,000 rand is for an iPhone. That's a really expensive point of sale device compared to Yoko's device. But on the other hand, if I already have an iPhone,
Mm.
then the cost for me to do that is zero. So,
Exactly.
so it's a highly competitive space.
Mm.
There's some massive international players playing in it. So,
Mm.
um, I personally, I would not play in that space. Maybe I'm not cutthroat enough, but it is, yeah. Like I said, if you crack it, it's awesome,
Yeah.
but very
Yeah.
competitive.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say on the SnapScan topic, like I got an invoice I had to pay last week, and at the bottom it had a SnapScan barcode. And I was thinking, oh, I have to go fetch my card number, get the CVV number, whatever. And I see the barcode, the SnapScan. I was like, sweet, phone's right here, paid. Thanks for coming. And I thought it was great. So I think, yeah, if they just were able to get more people using it, it's still great technology. There's still space. That's my personal take. Um, all right, so we've covered it. So we've got advertising, affiliate marketing. We were in e-commerce, freemium, SaaS, and we did transaction fees. So six business models that are out there. And Renier, before we leave, and I did give you the heads up, it's kind of looking at your phone, and we've given some examples along the way. And one of the first ones that I mentioned was Eskom Push, so kind of looking at their business model. But other apps that we have on our phones that are local based, and what business model are they using? So I'm just going to give one last example, which is Easy Equities, and that's again transaction fees. So there again, you say it's
Mm.
cutthroat and it's difficult, but they're doing pretty well. They're growing and they're using the transaction fees model.
Yeah, that's true. That's I was referring more to like payment transaction fees where
Payment,
there's
yeah.
obviously some other transaction fees as well. So for me,
Mm,
something that I use daily is an app called Alarm, which actually manages my house alarm,
fantastic.
and I pay a
Yeah.
monthly. I think it's 35 rand or 50 rand a month to use that app. And what's quite convenient, you can think, 50 rand a month, but what's quite convenient is now my wife and I both have that app connected to our alarm. So if she switches it on, I get a notification that she switched it on, and vice versa. So you no longer have that thing of, having to phone the wife, did you put on the alarm? Or, they
Mm,
kind of
mm, mm,
sorted that family management of the alarm out.
mhm.
And for I think it's 30 or 50 rand a month. It's actually not bad. So that's
That's
one that I
great.
use, which is a local. I believe it's a local app, locally developed. Another one that I ended up using quite a lot is I got Go Solar, which is the subscription solar or
Again,
renting the solar
subscription.
solution. And
Hmm.
yeah, so but they've got this app which is a Solarman Smart app. I don't think it's a local app, but nonetheless I use that often. But I suppose they cover it through the
Yeah, the
subscription fees.
quick question.
Um,
Are you happy to give them your money every month? Like, are you
Oh,
happy with
absolutely.
getting?
We're hitting those 4 hour 4 hour stretches at the moment. Loving it. And then the last one that comes to mind is WhatsApp. And I'm still not paying for WhatsApp, which probably explains why if I send you a picture of like home gym equipment, Bobby, the next thing I do when I see on Instagram, I log in and then I see all these ads for home gym equipment. So they're probably reading my WhatsApps and sending me
Hmm.
ads based on things they see me chat to people about.
That is a pot
So
goiter.
yeah, we
Very
haven't
different
spoken
there.
about that. We haven't spoken about that business model, but yeah,
Selling
the
data.
switch on your microphone and listen to what you're doing, and then selling ads to you on a different platform.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that's a real thing. But I guess it also fits into advertising at the end of the day, right? So they're taking the data, converting it into advertising. But anyways, Renia, thank you very much for sharing your insights. I think this conversation is very important. It might not be as light as we've had on the podcast before, but it's such an important concept to understand. So when you're planning, when you're building out those startups, think about that business and how you're going to generate revenue.
yeah, awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for listening. And yeah, hit that subscribe button. Cool.
Thanks, Bobby. Have a good one.